rain fell like cold static through the smog-choked sky, drumming against tin roofs and flickering neon. The market was closing, one shutter at a time, lights dying in sequence until the street was nothing but shadows and the hiss of rain on broken pavement. Eli Vance stood under the canopy of his repair shop, wiping grease from his hands, a faint ache settling in his chest where grief had long since built a home. He told himself he'd close early tonight, maybe bring home noodles for the kids, maybe pretend for a few minutes that everything was fine. But the universe had a way of breaking such small promises. Something moved in the alley across from him, small, hunched, trembling. Eli frowned. Stray drones often prowled there, scavenging scraps of metal. But this was no machine. It was breathing. A child, maybe. A faint blue shimmer caught the neon, skin reflecting light like oil on water. His first instinct was to turn away. This city, Virelia outpost, was filled with the lost and unwanted. The less he saw, the safer his family stayed. Yet something in that motion, that slow collapse to the ground, pierced through his practiced indifference. He crossed the street. The air smelled of coolant and ozone. The figure flinched as he approached. It was a girl, small, alien, her eyes enormous and luminous, her hair tangled with dirt. In her arms, she clutched something wrapped in cloth, pressing it to her chest as if it were alive. "Don't hurt," she whispered, her voice raw and broken, each word formed with effort. "Please bury my sister." Eli froze. For a moment, all he could hear was the rain and his own heartbeat. He glanced at the bundle. Too still, too small. "Kid," he muttered, trying to find steady ground in his voice. "You can't stay out here. Patrols'll see you." The girl shook her head violently. "No patrol, no humans, just help her rest." It would have been easy to walk away. He had done it before, looked away from beggars, from the ragged Ithari who wandered the human districts with hollow eyes and empty hands. The Ithari were engineered for labor biotech grown from humanity's arrogance, created to breathe life into dying worlds. When they'd outlived their usefulness, the corporations called them waste biomass and dumped them into colonies like this one. No one wanted trouble with their kind. But the girl's trembling hands, the way she held the body, as though afraid the world would steal, even that it clawed at something deep in him. He crouched down slowly. "What's your name?" "Zara," her voice cracked. She was leery. Eli swallowed hard, leery. The name carried no meaning to him, but it hit with a kind of fragile reverence. He looked at the small form wrapped in cloth and remembered another body, his wife's, sealed in a plastic quarantine bag 3 years ago. No burial, no goodbye, just a notice and an invoice. He remembered his daughter asking, "Where did Mommy go?" and having no answer that wasn't cruel. He exhaled and rubbed a hand over his face. "You can't be out here," he said finally. "You'll freeze." Zara's head tilted, confusion flickering through her wide, wet eyes. "Cold is fine. Just need ground, real ground. You help." Eli hesitated. His shop door was a few meters away. Inside, his His tools glowed faintly in standby, and the hum of a small heater promised safety. But safety for him and his kids. Asterisk asterisk, not asterisk asterisk for her. If someone saw him take in an alien child, even one half dead with grief, he'd lose his license, his home, maybe worse. And yet he was already imagining his daughter, Lena, with her soft heart and endless questions. She would have begged him to help. His son, Cade, would have hidden behind her, suspicious but curious. They had inherited their mother's compassion in different shapes. Maybe he owed it to them not to harden completely. "All right," he muttered. "Come inside, just for tonight." Zara stared at him, uncertain, as if kindness was something she didn't quite believe existed. Then she nodded once and followed him through the rain. Inside, the shop's lights hummed awake. She blinked against the brightness, clutching her bundle tighter. Eli found an old blanket and gestured toward the corner. "Sit there. I'll get something warm." When he turned back, she was already unwrapping part of the cloth. He caught a glimpse, pale blue skin, small features, eyes closed forever. Her sister looked almost peaceful. Eli forced himself not to look too long. "You shouldn't show that here," he said quietly. "If anyone sees." "No one will." Her voice was small but firm. "You promise you help her rest?" "I said I'd try." He hesitated. "There's a ridge past the wall, some old soil patches. It's not far, but we'll have to wait for dawn." Zara nodded again. She sat motionless, watching the rain streak down the workshop window, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the fabric covering her sister. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was thick with things neither of them could say. Eli busied himself with the heater, pretending not to notice the sting behind his eyes. It had been years since he'd done anything this foolish. The world didn't reward good deeds anymore, it punished them. But as he watched the girl, tiny, stubborn, lost, he felt that old ache shift into something else. Not hope exactly, but the memory of it. Hours passed. The rain eased into mist, and the city's noise dimmed to a dull hum. Zara had fallen asleep sitting upright, her sister's body still in her arms. Eli draped the blanket over her shoulders and turned off the lights. For the first time in years, the shop felt almost like a home again, fragile and undeserved. He stood by the window, looking out at the distant glow of the patrol towers. He could almost hear his wife's voice in his head, gentle, chiding. "You can't save the world, Eli. But you can save one person. That's how it starts." When he looked back at the corner, the alien girl stirred in her sleep, murmuring words in her own language. He didn't understand them, but somehow he knew they were prayers. By dawn, he had made his choice. He would take her beyond the wall. He would bury the little one where no machine or patrol could touch her. Maybe it wouldn't change anything. Maybe it would only bring trouble. But for the first time in years, doing the right thing felt more important than surviving another day. Outside, the first light of morning bled through the clouds. Eli pulled on his coat, his heart steady and heavy at once. The girl still slept, her thin hands curled protectively around what she'd lost. He let her rest a little longer, knowing the next day would demand more courage from both of them than either should have left. When he finally opened the door, the world smelled like wet metal, and something faintly new, like air that hadn't yet decided whether to forgive or to remember. The world outside the colony wall was a wasteland of dust and glass, broken by the skeletons of machines left behind from the first terraforming attempt. The sky hung low and colorless, an iron lid pressing down on everything that dared to move beneath it. Eli drove in silence, the hum of his old hover truck cutting through the morning chill. The alien girl sat beside him, her small frame wrapped in a blanket, her sister's body cradled on her lap, as if the weight itself kept her anchored to life. His two children, Lena and Cade, huddled in the back seat, whispering questions he didn't know how to answer. The farther they went from the colony, the weaker the radio signal grew, until only the static remained, a soft, broken lullaby for the dead. Eli had crossed the perimeter before on supply runs, but this was different. This time, every mile felt like a step into something irreversible. He caught himself glancing at the girl. Zara's eyes followed the barren landscape with a kind of quiet reverence, as though she could still see what once was there. "You sure this is where you want to go?" he asked. She nodded, her voice soft but certain. "Earth ground, not human walls. My sister must rest in open air." Her words carried a strange rhythm, half prayer, half instruction, and Eli found himself believing her despite knowing how little sense any of this made. The government called the land outside the wall dead. No oxygen, no life. Yet, when the wind shifted, he caught hints of something floral and clean, like rain on leaves that no longer existed. They stopped near a ridge, the soil cracked and pale under a muted sun. The air monitors on his wrist beeped faintly, signaling borderline breathable conditions. He turned them off. Some things didn't need to be measured. "This is it?" he asked. Zara nodded again, stepping out of the truck, her bare feet pressing into the dirt as if greeting an old friend. The girl's fragility was deceptive. She moved with purpose, her body attuned to something deeper than instinct. Eli and his children followed, each carrying tools, an old spade, a scrap of tarp, anything they could find. Together they dug into the hard earth, their breaths sinking with the scrape of metal on stone. Zara said nothing, only watched, the wind tangling her hair. When the pit was finally deep enough, she knelt and unwrapped the cloth bundle. The younger sister's body shimmered faintly, light pulsing beneath her skin like a dying ember. Cade looked away, but Lena reached out, curiosity winning over fear. "She's beautiful," Lena whispered. Zara smiled faintly. "She was light-born, we all are. Humans made us to breathe poison and give back clean sky." Her voice didn't tremble, it held quiet truth. Eli looked at her sharply. "Made you?" "Yes," she said, "long ago, to fix worlds, to turn red rock green." She brushed a strand of hair from her sister's face. "But when we began to live, they called us error. The wind carried her words away, scattering them like seeds. Eli didn't respond. He'd worked for the Terraforming Bureau once, before the collapse, repairing machines designed to alter air composition. He never questioned the process, never wondered what became of the organic components mixed into those bioplants. Now, looking at the girl, he understood the truth in a way that scraped against his conscience. Zara reached into the folds of her tunic and pulled out a small crystal, the size of a human heart. It glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She placed it in the grave beside her sister and began to hum, a sound low and resonant, not made for human ears. The soil responded. The light spread through the ground, veins of blue weaving outward in intricate patterns. Eli's children gasped, stepping back as faint green shoots began to push through the dust, fragile, trembling, alive. He wanted to ask how it was possible, but the words caught in his throat. The air around them felt thicker, cleaner. Zara's song carried sorrow and power, something older than science and more sacred than faith. When the ritual ended, she pressed her palm to the soil and whispered a final word. The glow dimmed, leaving behind the quiet hum of life still breathing beneath the surface. Eli helped her stand. "It's done," he said softly. "She's at peace now." Zara looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than her small frame should allow. "Not yet. They will come. They always come for the bodies." A chill went through him. "Who?" "Humans," she said simply. "They take what dies. They say we belong to them even after death." The sound of distant engines rose on the horizon, low, mechanical, and unmistakable. Eli turned toward it, his heart sinking. Through the dust, he saw the dark silhouettes of patrol drones sweeping across the ridge, their red sensors blinking like watchful eyes. They were coming fast. Inside the truck, he ordered his kids, his voice sharp. They obeyed without question. He turned to Zara. "They're tracking you." She shook her head. "Tracking her, the body. Our bodies make air. Humans use them for harvest." Eli's stomach twisted. It was one thing to exploit the living. It was another to mine the dead. His wife's last research assignment had been with the Bureau's biogenesis program. He remembered her telling him once, half drunk and tired, that some projects were better left undone. Now he knew why. The drones drew closer, their searchlights slicing through the haze. Zara stood her ground, expression calm, almost resigned. "You should go," she said. "If they find me, they'll take you too." "I'm not leaving you," Eli said. Her gaze softened. "Humans always say that, then they run." He didn't move, not this one. The air filled with the hum of engines as the patrol vehicles crested the hill. His hand went to the rusted rifle behind the driver's seat, though he knew it wouldn't matter. Against drones, against the Bureau, he was powerless. Yet, in that moment, the thought of handing her over felt worse than death. Zara took a step toward him, her small hand reaching up to touch his arm. "You already gave more than most. You gave her peace. Then I'll give you the same," he said. Her lips parted in surprise, but before she could speak, a drone spotlight cut across them, bathing the valley in white. Eli shoved her toward the truck. "Go," he shouted. She hesitated, torn between obedience and defiance. The first shot fired a pulse round that shattered the ground near their feet. Zara turned, eyes blazing with unspoken emotion. "You can't stop them," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said, gripping the rifle tighter. "But I can make them remember who we are." The drones descended, wind whipping through the dust. Zara pressed her palm to the earth once more, and a faint glow began to stir beneath the soil where her sister rested. Eli didn't understand it yet, but something was waking, something that might change everything if it survived. As the first patrol vehicle broke through the haze, he raised his weapon and stood between it and the girl, his silhouette framed against the faint blue shimmer spreading outward through the valley. The machines didn't slow. Zara's voice rose again, not in fear this time, but in a song that made the air itself vibrate. Eli glanced back just once, saw her kneeling in the light, and realized that the choice he'd made, this reckless, foolish act of compassion, was no longer about survival at all. It was about remembering what it meant to be human. The drones closed in, the sound of their engines swallowing everything else. Then came the light bright, rising, alive. And for a moment, Eli thought the dead might have finally learned how to breathe again. The air cracked open with sound and light as the drones descended. Eli's rifle felt small and useless in his hands, a relic from a time when humans still believed courage could change the outcome of a battle. The patrol's voice boomed through the speakers, mechanical and cold. "Unauthorized entities detected. Surrender the Athari specimen immediately." The children huddled in the truck, their terrified faces pressed against the glass. Zara stood beside the grave she had made, her small frame outlined by a glow seeping through the soil. The earth itself seemed to breathe. Eli shouted over the rising wind, "Stay down," but Zara didn't move. Her hair lifted in the static-charged air, eyes luminous, fixed on the oncoming machines. "They will not stop," she said, her tone neither frightened nor angry, merely certain. "They take everything, even what they kill." Eli wanted to drag her back, hide her, shield her with the weight of his body if he had to, but she stepped forward instead. The drones opened fire, energy pulses scorching the air. The shots struck the ground near the grave, erupting dust and light. Yet where they landed, the earth didn't burn, it bloomed. Vines of faintly glowing matter spread outward, wrapping the impact sites like roots reclaiming metal. The air filled with the sharp scent of ozone and something impossibly alive. Zara looked at him once, her expression unreadable, almost peaceful. "Tell them," she said softly, "we only wanted to breathe." Then she placed her hands upon the glowing soil, and the light beneath her sister's grave erupted upward. Eli staggered back as the ground split open in a silent flare. Zara's body began to dissolve, not like flesh breaking apart, but like light unweaving itself into color. Threads of blue and silver drifted from her skin, carried by the wind. She didn't scream. She only smiled faintly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Now she won't be alone," she whispered. "Zara," Eli's voice broke, raw with disbelief. He lunged toward her, but the wave of light forced him back. The glow surged through the valley, spreading in a pulse that swallowed the patrol vehicles. The drones flickered, sensors overloading, engines sputtering midair before crashing to the ground. The Bureau soldiers stumbled, their suits short-circuiting, visors flashing warnings in red. Within moments, they were on their knees, coughing, surrounded by air that was no longer toxic, but fresh and breathable. Then the light receded, leaving silence so deep it felt sacred. The valley shimmered with new life, green vines curling through cracks, crystalline leaves unfurling in slow motion. The air monitor on Eli's wrist blinked green for the first time in years. Oxygen, stable. He fell to his knees, breath caught between awe and grief. Zara was gone. Only the faintest residue of light drifted like dust motes above the soil. His daughter stepped from the truck, trembling. "Dad, where is she?" He couldn't answer right away. The question hung there, heavy and pure. He walked to the edge of the glowing ground and crouched, his fingers brushing the warm, living soil. "She's here," he said finally, voice rough. "She's everywhere now." The patrol survivors, stripped of their weapons, stumbled away toward the ridge. One of them looked back, helmet cracked, face pale, and whispered something Eli couldn't hear before vanishing into the dust. The Bureau would return, of course. They would study this, claim it, maybe even destroy it again. But for now, this small patch of alien Earth belonged to her. Days blurred together as Eli and his children worked quietly to hide what had happened. They built a small shelter by the valley's edge, pretending to salvage scrap for trade, while tending to the strange flora that continued to grow. The plants glowed faintly at night, whispering in the wind, their movement almost deliberate, as if aware of being watched. Lena often sat near them, sketching the shapes they took, whispering to them the way she used to whisper to her mother's grave. Cade stopped having nightmares. He started helping Eli repair water purifiers, humming the alien melody Zara had sung. Word spread slowly through the outpost. Miners returning from the ridge spoke of a breathing field, of clean air and strange lights. Some called it a miracle, others a weapon. The Bureau sealed off the area, citing contamination. No one spoke publicly about what they saw that day, but everyone who had breathed that air seemed a little less cruel afterward. Eli knew better than to believe in miracles. He'd seen too much of humanity's talent for twisting them. Yet each morning, when the first light touched the valley, the wind carried a scent he'd never known before, warm, living, full of memory. The dead land was healing itself. Maybe so was he. One evening, Lena brought him a flower that had grown from the soil, blue and translucent, its petals pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. "Can I keep it?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. Just treat it gently." She smiled. "I think it likes when we talk to it." Eli watched her walk away, the flower cupped carefully in her hands, and thought of Zara's last words. Now she won't be alone. Perhaps that was what she meant. Her people had been turned into tools, their deaths fueling worlds that despised them. But in this one act, this final merging of life and sacrifice, she'd given back what humanity had forgotten: the ability to share existence instead of consuming it. That night, he returned to the grave. The soil glowed faintly under the starlight, and when he placed his hand against it, warmth spread through his palm. "You did it," he whispered. "You changed the air." The words sounded small against the vast silence, but they felt right. Behind him, the children slept in the truck, faces peaceful in the pale light. He looked toward the colony, its towers distant and sharp against the horizon. They would come again. He knew men with scanners and guns and questions he couldn't answer. But for now, there was quiet. The wind rose, carrying dust and light in spirals that glittered briefly before fading into the sky. For a moment, he thought he heard her voice again, soft, melodic, blending with the hum of the valley. It wasn't language, not exactly. More like the memory of one. Eli stood, pulling his coat tighter. "We'll keep it safe," he murmured. "Your garden, your sky." As he turned to leave, a faint pulse rippled through the ground, spreading outward in a circle of light that shimmered before fading. The valley breathed once more. When dawn broke, the horizon was no longer gray, but tinged with color, a faint blush of green, like the first promise of spring. In the quiet truck, his children stirred, and Lena whispered sleepily, "Dad, were they monsters like people said?" He looked out at the glowing field, his voice steady. "No, sweetheart," he said. "They were more human than most of us will ever be." The morning wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of new life. Eli started the engine, the truck's hum merging with the sound of leaves rustling against the air that was finally, blessedly, alive. And as they drove toward the rising sun, the light followed, gentle, persistent, and impossibly human.